Bueno, les damos la bienvenida a todos los profesores y profesoras que nos acompañan hoy, ya sea en ejercicio o en formación. Queremos partir esta segunda sesión de nuestro seminario, por supuesto con un saludo, ¿cierto?, por la ocasión del Día del Profesor y de la Profesora. Y la verdad es que es difícil en estos tiempos, ¿cierto?, de aciagos, precisamente para el rol docente. Además está el tema de la deuda histórica, ¿cierto?, y la precarización con la que nos hemos enfrentado en estos contextos de pandemia. Y siempre en estos tiempos convulsionados dicen que es bueno volver a la madre, ¿cierto?, a la maestra de Chile, queremos volver a Gabriela Mistral, de la cual afortunadamente en estos últimos años hemos visto que se ha reconocido, ¿cierto?, su rol además de militante, de pensadora, de política, de compañera de su compañera, y también de maestra rural, que es un rol que para regiones como las nuestras, que tienen altos tasas e índices de ruralidad, es un rol que cobra especial sentido. Y en esa línea les quiero leer un párrafo que Gabriela Mistral nos comparte en relación a este rol. Dice: durante mis 7 años de profesorado en los Andes, hice siempre al aire libre, bajo un gran parrón del liceo, mis clases de lectura, recitación, historia y geografía. La clase perdía en gravedad, lo que para mí es ventaja. Perdía en irrealidad, era más humana, más real. Observé que las niñas en clase solo reciben, y en el huerto dan, preguntan, piensan, se interesan por la tierra toda. Bienvenidos y feliz día del profesor y de la profesora. Yasna.
Muchas gracias, es un placer para mí poder inaugurar, después de las palabras tan profundas de Francisca, esta segunda sesión de nuestro seminario bilingüe en pedagogía social, en justicia social y prácticas inclusivas. Hoy día nos acompaña la doctora María Jesús Inostroza. Bienvenida, María Jesús. Un placer, un privilegio, un honor siempre tenerte con nosotros. Y recordar también a todos ustedes que esta actividad está enmarcada en un proyecto FONDECYT de iniciación que se titula Exploring Teaching Strategies that Respond to Diversity and Guarantee Social Justice in Chilean EFL Classrooms. A study of teachers' perceptions on the implementation of inclusive practices in socially vulnerable school contexts. Y el folio de este proyecto es el 111-911-93. Muchas gracias por su presencia y vamos a darle la palabra a Constanza Castillo, profesora de la Universidad Austral, quien va a moderar esta presentación.
Gracias. So good afternoon, everyone. Let's switch to English. Thank you all for being here. As Professor Yasna said, my name is Constanza Castillo, and I'm going to be the moderator of today's session called Inclusive Practices in Early Years Education, Classroom Experiences from 2 state-run schools in Chile. This is the second session of our seminar called Moving Towards the Construction of Our Local Pedagogy, Exploration of Inclusive Teaching Practices in the Chilean EFL Classroom. Before we start, I'd like to tell you that at the end of the session, 2 books will be raffled. The first one is Professor Yasna Yilorm's Let's Go for English in 100 Fun Ways. And the second is La Mala Educación, written by Fernando Atria. In addition, I'd also like to ask you to please use the chat to leave any comments, questions you may have. There will be a round of questions once the presentation ends. In this occasion, I have the pleasure to introduce this session's lecturer, PhD María Jesús Inostroza Arauz. She's a Chilean teacher of English, storyteller, and researcher who has been working in primary English teaching for more than 10 years. She's also a member of the network of Chilean research in ELT and IETEFL, a Young Learners and Teenagers 6 Events Coordinator. Currently, she is a teacher educator at the Faculty of Education at Universidad de Concepción. Please welcome Professor Inostroza with a round of virtual applauses.
Thank you very much for that, Constanza, and I really thank you, Jasna, for inviting me to take in part of this presentation or this round of seminars. This very interesting project that we hope, I'm sure we will collect a lot of information to inform our practices from the local perspective. My presentation today, we're talking about it earlier, is in a day that is special for everyone. It's a day we commemorate where we started to be a union as teachers in Chile. And it's important to remember that we work together for education, but we do not have to forget about ourselves as professionals, as individuals. If we are healthy mentally and physically, our students will have definitely better opportunities to learn. So I need to start sharing my screen. I hope this works. Share screen. Now you should be able to see my presentation. Yes, you are?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Great. So this presentation will go through, as it says in its title, 2 state-run schools projects experiences in early years education. So this is, oh, I need to move it so I can see my, so we will talk inclusive education, how we defined it. Then we will talk about the information from these 2 projects, one carried out in Santiago, and the other one carried out in Concepción. And finally, I'll share with you some of my conclusions from these experiences. Before we start talking about inclusive education, I would like to clarify that when we talk about early years education, here we are referring to the education process that goes before regular primary education. So we are talking about here in Chile, kinder and pre-kinder, just to be clear, right? This is not about primary education, but about what happens before that. So Constanza mentioned that you could use the chat for comments and questions, and I will take advantage of that to bring you in as part of the presentation today. So when we think of inclusive education today, I would like to start by asking you, how would you define inclusive education? If you can write your answers in the chat box. Maybe I give you a minute to think and write your comments. Question again, how would you define inclusive education? Some answers coming in. Actually, it's just one. Don't be shy, guys. This is construction of knowledge. So, okay, education for all, empowerment, a type of education which teaches to view differences as a potential worth for everyone, the same opportunities for everyone, teach for without any barriers, no one left out or feels left out. Maybe just a couple more. We give more minutes until 18:16. Okay, so thank you very much for those definitions. Some of you started very shy with keywords, but then you got excited and completed your ideas. The concept of education for all, and that considered everyone's, seems to be a general agreement. And that's I'm very glad to see that in your words, as there is a tendency to think that when we think of inclusive education, we are only thinking on disability. So when we think of inclusive education today, in 2020, or in the in this century, we need to consider as well, that it will involve sensory and physical needs, of course. So here we have sight disability, for example. It would also consider cognition and learning needs. So what we have attention disorder, for example, and social, emotional, and mental health. That would also be part of the needs that we consider in inclusive education. Communication and interaction. So all the needs that are related to how children or young people are able to communicate and interact. So everyone can be part of that. And finally, linguistic and cultural diversity. So at the moment, we will understand inclusive education currently today as a broad rights-based concept of education that encompasses anyone who might be excluded from or have limited access to educational system within a country, and where there may be barriers that affect learning, whether they are environmental, societal, organizational, or attitudinal. So this quote is from a book that was published by the British Council on inclusive education. I've left a link. This is free to download. And it provides a general idea on the different contexts that we need to consider as inclusive education. So we are not going to focus only on disability, but also on the diverse spectrum of needs that our students may have, and therefore we need to address, and we cannot just forget about. Now that we have a clear idea of the concept and what we are understanding as inclusive education, I would like to move to the EFL curriculum in Chile. We all know in a timeline, we all know that it's compulsory from 5th grade. However, we have this inclusion of English not yet in the compulsory primary curriculum from early primary, but as a suggestion from 1st grade in 2012, and then another suggested curriculum for kinder and pre-kinder, so early years education, very recently, last year. Now, why is this, am I addressing this? It's because we need to understand how the concept of inclusive education is connected to the children's experiences. If we are talking about all these different elements that are part of inclusive education, we also need to see how these are connected to what the curriculum suggests or considers of the role of English, and therefore and also the children's experiences as part of learning this language. So if we take a look at the Ministry of Education's suggested curriculum for primary, for early primary, so this would be from 1st to 4th grade in primary education. I invite you to take a look at this, the aim of learning English in these years. So this is the aim. This is why we want children to start learning English from 1st grade. Now, this is why we want to create, or it was created, a dual program for bilingual Spanish and English for early years educators. So nursery teachers were invited to take part in this program. So to get some development in terms of profession, to be able to support children in the development of English as part of their routine language. Okay. And when we go closer to, so we have seen the objective of the goal, the aim for the primary suggested curriculum. This is professional. I've just shown you the professional development program that is in place to support early years educators on the use of the language. But if we take a look at the suggested curriculum for early years education in Chile, we have two skills or attitudes that are expected in this as part of this suggested curriculum. So in these two aims or learning outcomes, we could see that there is reference to the child's environment and identity and reality, right? And to have this positive attitude towards themselves as well as to this other language. Now, I want that you bear this in mind, as we would see in the suggested curriculum that even when this is stated, we don't see much of that in what is happening on how is organized, how it is supported, how this is supported in the development of the different units. Obviously, as I said, this is just 2019, so it's been in place a couple of months, not even a year yet. So what I'm going to share with you today, as I said, is connected to two projects that were taking place in early years education. Based on these three extracts that I share with you, what can you identify as the role of children's experiences in the EFL learning process? Again, if you can share your answers in the chat box, please. Based on the three, on bases curriculares suggested for early primary, the program for professional development for early years educators, and what is presented as part of the attitudes or skills for the suggested curriculum for early years education? What is the role of, based on that, what do you think is the role of children's experiences in the EFL learning process? Oh, I don't see the chat now. Okay. Okay. So far, there are just two answers. It's not an easy question. It's not a tricky question, but it's a natural question that we may ask if we are teaching young learners in their early years. We assume that we would like to see some of their experiences as part of their curriculum development, right? Okay, so we have this suggested curriculum, this idea of positive attitudes to learn the language and feel motivated to engage in the learning of the language. However, in the aims, we see that the main aim, and I think this is something you already discussed, but very briefly in the previous seminar, the aim seems to be mainly focused on the development of the language skills over the consideration of their personal experiences. Yes, it's definitely presented in here, the need of considering their own and valuing, giving value to their own experiences, their own identity. So what I'm going to share with you today are two projects carried out in state-run schools, which are focused on experiencing this inclusive opportunity for everyone in the classroom. The first project deals with storytelling. So very briefly, I would like to talk about storytelling. And so there are many benefits for storytelling. These are some of these benefits. Of course, it provides child-friendly context and meaning construction supported by images and gestures. It also helps to develop children's listening, sub-skills, and multi-literacies. It motivates children by appealing to their imagination and curiosity. And it appeals to children's previous knowledge of and familiarity with the story. So these are elements that we can consider when we use storytelling, and we assume so when we work with young learners, that we will incorporate practices that are connected to what they are used to or what we expect they are used to. Another relevant point regarding this, regarding storytelling, is that stories have the potential to allow children to relate to the characters and connect the story with their own experiences, feelings, and thoughts. So children may not be very familiarized with this, with the language in general, but by characters, I might connect to who I am and the feelings that I may encounter. And finally, when we think of storytellings, we need to considering selecting these stories with a plot that provides a way to incorporate children's identities into the lesson. So just by using any stories, that wouldn't do if we understand that stories are an opportunity to allow this reflection of children's identity taking place in the language classroom. So given all these benefits and elements, we use storytelling in a school, and we use two main strategies. And the main focus of this intervention was allowing children to feel part of the English lesson through storytelling. One of the strategies that we used was to adapt fairy tales. So we used two stories, or stories such as the enormous turnip and the gingerbread man. And these two were adapted to the local context. Are you familiarized with the enormous turnip? Yes, no. You can write your answer in the chat box. So no? Just the gingerbread man? Oh, that's very interesting. Okay, so the enormous turnip is a story of a farmer who wants someday just come up with this huge, enormous turnip, and he tries to pull, but he couldn't take it out, so he calls his wife. Both together try, they couldn't. They call a boy, and then a girl, a dog, a cat, and a mouse. So they're all pulling and pulling. Now the adaptation here to the local context was that when I first read the story, I didn't know what a turnip is. So I assumed that the children that I was working with didn't know what a turnip was either. So we changed the story to make it as an enormous carrot or an enormous potato. So they were able to relate to this vegetable, and we also use in some cases they use the farmer, in some cases we use the market seller, because some of the students that I was working with have never been to the countryside. So we modify the story, keeping the language and keeping the structure to make it closer to the student. With the gingerbread man, we modified it. Actually, there's a very similar story in the Chilean country or fall culture, La Tortilla Corredora. So it's the same story like the gingerbread man, but we actually have a story in our so we use the characters adapted to that context. Now, this adaptation was a great opportunity for children to talk about their experiences, in some cases in the countryside, and in some cases where they lived, and also allow them to talk about their relatives and their holidays. In the enormous turnip, we have, could be the family members that are helping on taking out this huge or enormous turnip. And it's the same with the people who are running after this tortilla, let's say. Another strategy that we use was collaborative stories. We provided different characters, different settings, and different events with pictures, and children, obviously with our support, were able to choose the different elements from the story.
Seminario, de hecho.
Hello? Okay. The children were able to story elements according to what they preferred, and different stories emerged based on those experiences. We had stories related to migration, to diverse families, also stories related to families, to friendship, sorry. So based on this diverse set of resources, children were able to tell their own stories. Now, in terms of how storytelling, this is a project that I carried out, or we carried out fairly long time ago, 2009, 2010. At the moment, there are more resources regarding how we can use resources or stories to support children finding themselves in the use of picture books and learning this foreign language. So there is this project that's being carried out, or that's going on, that's called the PEL. I included a link here, the PEPLT. And this is picture books in European English language teaching. However, the information provided on how to use picture books in primary English language teaching contributes also to keep exploring the use of this type of resources to make our own classroom more inclusive. The second project was carried out in 2018, and this project works on language modes in an early years classroom, and this took place in Concepción, in a particular school where we had where 1.5% of the students are deaf or hard of hearing. This is a very particular, as I said, a context, as the teacher of English is a fluent user of Chilean Sign Language. And after a previous experience as part of the school to support a child that was starting her education in pre-K, who was deaf, he wanted to keep, or we want to keep exploring the contribution of Chilean Sign Language when teaching English to hearing students in pre-kinder, not to deaf students. So in this project, I joined in as a teacher assistant, and we work with the teacher of English. We're both fluent in Spanish and English, but only the teacher was fluent in Chilean Sign Language. For a whole year, every time the teacher assistant, me, and the teacher, every time we use English all the times, but we also use Chilean Sign Language. As a teacher assistant, I was learning Chilean Sign Language while I was taking part of the project, together with the children. The teacher assistant only use English in the classroom, but the teacher also used Spanish. So it was a 2 modes, 3 languages happening in the classroom. Children, on the other hand, there was no restriction for them to use any of the 3 languages that were happening in the classroom. There were, if they wanted, they could use Spanish. Or English or Chilean Sign Language. It was up to them. But for teacher assistant, that was me, and the teacher, we both were using English when we interact with each other, and when interacting with children, we also use sign language. If I didn't know some of the signs, obviously I asked the teacher which sign would go for X. Now, what we were able to explore in this after this project was that Chilean Sign Language became a tool to support this group of children English language learning process. And I would like to share with you 3 ways that Chilean Sign Language was a support. One is it was used to show understanding. So children were able to show that they were understanding what we were requesting without using Spanish or English, but sign language. They were able to support interaction. That means that when they were using English, they were using sign language as well as a support for what they were saying. But Chilean Sign Language also became an opportunity to share what they have learned in English and or in Chilean Sign Language. So based on these examples, on the 2 projects, we could say that with this understanding or general understanding or broader understanding of inclusion, the English lesson could provide an opportunity to experience language diversity. So the diversity in the type of language that we use, but also in the mode of language that we could use. The process of inclusion or make it inclusion visible is not implicit, as it is a great chance to openly discuss with children the importance of diversity, respect, collaboration, and empathy. We know then, obviously in these 2 examples, we can see that children can be active parties that trigger interaction and communication. However, in this project, I have to say there is something missing. Unfortunately, even when we know that they can be active parties in the way we trigger interaction and communication, they were not visible. These voices or children's voices were not visible. And that's a shame. That's a shame because we need to understand that children are social actors who are definitely able to contribute to portray their everyday life and understanding. Therefore, we need to pay attention to what they are saying. And as Tavali mentioned it, I need to move this one here, sorry. This understanding on how children learn from their own views or on their own words could help to strengthen primary English teaching education in Chile in the near future. So in these two projects, we tried to make a point on considering the diverse elements or the diverse experiences of children in the classrooms, in these classrooms. We tried to incorporate the different modes of language available so they can be aware of this diversity. However, their voices on how they experience these two projects are missing. And I wish that next time we go through this type of project, we always consider. Finally, I would like to close this presentation with a quote from López Copar, who is a teacher, an academic from Mexico, called pedagogy. And he says that we need to utilize English as a pretext to construct a field for the participants who would view each other as creative and intelligent individuals capable of producing different ways of knowing. That means that English is just a way to get somewhere else, and that somewhere else is the development of this whole child. This child that is maybe their parents from a different country, maybe their first language is not Spanish, maybe their cultural background is completely different from the Chilean. And by that, I not only mean children whose parents are from Haiti, Colombia, but also whose parents are Mapuche people. So what's a diversity that we actually allow in the classroom? We need to be able to incorporate that diversity through the great and flexible environment that the English lesson provides. Just as López Copar says, just a pretext to make them feel that they can be anything and anyone in that particular environment. I included here, there are two very interesting articles from López Copar that you may want to explore later on. Thank you very much. That's RISELT website. If you don't know about RISELT, that's a network of Chilean research in ELT with a great archive with everything or almost everything that's been published in ELT research in Chile. And that's also the link for the Young Learners and Teenagers C group. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Inostroza, for sharing this presentation, for your thoughts, for the interaction. I really liked it. So thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. So as I said at the beginning, please feel welcome to use the chat, leave comments, maybe ask questions before we continue. Don't be shy. This is a tool that we gotta use as much as we can. You can also raise your hands if you like. Thank you for the link. There it is. So we've got a question. Thank you, Danae. In storytelling activities, how did children narrate their own stories?
Thank you for that question, Danae. I was waiting for that to come in. Children, as I said, it was with support. So we had the characters, and I started, of course, the story. Once upon a time, there was and they show the picture of the character, a girl. We talked about the name sometimes before. So we had a general idea of what was this story about. And then I was narrating, and they were showing the pictures. Sometimes they were able to say was like a girl whose name was, and they said Rosita or Michelle or whoever. So by them sharing their pictures, I was telling the story. So it was their story, but with my words or my help in English.
Thank you for that answer, Professor. So Karina Resuk says, thank you for your efforts. It is difficult to make people speak up in this situation. It was nice to hear you. Stories can create a warm environment to participate. Kids really enjoy playing with their imagination. Thank you, Karina. Now we've got Christopher's Tovares question. Was it difficult for you to adapt yourself in this classroom setting because you didn't know Chilean Sign Language?
Yes, and it was great to experience that level of less expertise. As when we tend to go to the classroom and we speak English slow or faster, we feel very confident. So we tend to forget about how was it at the beginning. And in this context, it was great because I was learning. They were teaching me as well. The children were teaching me sign language, and I had to ask for help. And sometimes it was challenging because there was one girl in particular who decided to communicate with me only in sign language. She was definitely more fluent in sign language than me, but every time I spoke to her in English, that means all the time, she replied in sign language. So I needed some help, and I asked for some help. Some of the children were able to help me, and some of the times I asked help for the teacher. But it was very interesting to see how I was, even when I was a teacher assistant, I was a pair or a peer in the learning process of sign language.
Now, Danae is asking, did the Chilean have a moment to share what they have learned in CHSL, Chilean controlled practice, or the focus was mainly English language?
The focus was English. So the teacher was able to use both languages. English, as you were able to see in the videos, orally and with the signs together. Everything, the whole focus was on English, and Chilean Sign Language was the support. But as I said, the decisions of children was in some cases different. They decided just to use sign language, even when we were in an EFL context.
Mm-hmm. Now, Pia raised her hand. There you go, Pia. Pia Tavali, I think it's your name.
Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose, but maybe I can just ask maybe just use this opportunity to thank María Jesús. It was a very interesting presentation. And I also have the question about the sign language and how was, I mean, I understood that the transition for the children was not that hard, and it was for you as a teacher. So maybe, I don't know, I wonder how you managed to deal with everything, María Jesús, like with the teaching and the English and the sign language and Spanish and everything. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia.
That was the good thing of being a teacher assistant. I was not doing the teaching. I was helping the teacher, which was also good, as to work with a person that is knowledgeable about the context. This is a teacher that, as I said, is fluent in Chilean Sign Language. He works in the school for at least 5 years, so he teaches all the grades in the school, from pre-K till 8th grade. And this was an exploration, and in the end the results were great. And now the school, because of this innovation, the school now has incorporated Chilean Sign Language as part of the subjects, which was a great gain after the project. So yes, not much of a responsibility without being the teacher, apart from enjoying myself.
So we have 2 more questions. Manuel Lara said, in your view, what are the main challenges in teaching English to special educational needs learners in Chile?
The SEN group is very diverse, and I think that one of the main challenges is the lack of knowledge that we have. In teacher education, we do not address this point, and I think that's one of the elements that we need to start incorporating as part of our teacher education programs. When we see the results, for example, in the end tests, Evaluación Nacional Docente, that we have for all pre-service teachers at the end of their education, one of the descriptors addresses this point. And most of our students in national-wide feel that they are not prepared to face or to support SEN students. And I think that that's mainly because we haven't taken this seriously as teacher educators, but also in terms of policy making. Decreto 83 decree is just in place a couple of years from now, 1820 or something like that. And before that, very little was told. Children, for example, all deaf and hard hearing children were taken out of the classroom during English lessons. So if you avoid the situation, you will never have to face it until you have to. And that doesn't mean that the results will be the best. So I think that's one of the pending points that we need to address in some way. Very soon, hopefully, all the teacher education programs, we start working on this.
Bruno Ramirez is asking, Chilean Sign Language seems to go in the same direction as ULD, Universal Design Language, as it provides students with opportunities for multiple means of representation and engagement. And then I have Professor Jasna's comments. María Jesús, thank you for your interesting presentation. We just had a talk with a school teacher and our group of pre-service teachers. We talked about comprehensible input strategies and how important they have been during online lessons. What do you think is the connection between comprehensible input strategies and sign language? How helpful can sign language be during online lessons?
Oh, thank you for that question. Just now, I was having this conversation a couple of weeks ago with Esteban, who is the teacher in this project, and he was saying that actually sign language is being very, very helpful in online sessions. Sometimes audio is not working, so in our session, in this session, for example, if everyone would know sign language and I would be fluent in sign language, actually, I would know sign language, we wouldn't need the chatbot when I ask you the question or your participation. You could just participate and I will be able to see you just through your camera. As a strategy, I think it could be very, very helpful because we use body language. I mean, moving and using body language is the way we communicate, is our part of the paralinguistic elements that we use to communicate, not only oral input. So by developing or knowing more about Chilean Sign Language, we could incorporate that as part of the resources that we could put in place for supporting EFL, definitely. Now, this is a point that we haven't addressed either in our education system or educational system, as through this project, these children, by learning sign language in the English lesson, they will be, or they are able now to communicate with their deaf classmates. Deaf and hard-hearing students are very isolated. In a deaf school that they used to be deaf schools, children who were deaf were able to socialize because everyone was deaf. At the moment, these children are part of regular schools, and not everyone, I mean, almost no one signs. So those children are definitely isolated. Through these kind of instances, what happens is that those children are able to also communicate with deaf students. So deaf students are less isolated.
Roberto Arenas is asking, do you think it's possible to incorporate sign language to English lessons with older students?
I don't know. I mean, it's worth trying. It could be a conversation that you could have with your own students. So if there are still some schools who start with the national curriculum in 5th grade, and you could have the conversation if you feel confident enough. Guys, we're going to start English. I know you feel very anxious about English in the classroom. Would you like to use some help that we could use, like using sign language, Chilean Sign Language? And they may agree, and they may use it or find it as a great support. Or they may say, no, I feel stupid doing this thing. And then brings you to a conversation about, why would you feel stupid? It's just another language. Do you also feel stupid when you speak English? So I think that this is a great opportunity to start talking about the diversity of language modes, but also on the language varieties. And here I would like to very briefly address a point that was mentioned in the previous session of this seminar series about how children feel about their own language, how they feel about Spanish and Chilean Spanish. That's a conversation that needs to be done and needs to be taken in the English lesson. Because if I'm saying that I'm going to teach you another language that's technically high status, how would they feel about their first language? If it's Spanish, what type of Spanish? Is it Colombian Spanish? Is it Venezuelan Spanish? Is it Creole? Is it Quechua? This is Mapudungun. How do you feel about those languages and how these interact, or their interaction with English as just any other language? So that would also be, I think, a great opportunity to address that point.
Thank you, Roberto. Any other questions, comments? Maybe 2 more questions. We've had some very interesting set of questions so far. So Bruno says, La tortilla corredora, I love that story. Thank you, Bruno. So we have another question. Christopher Tovar says, do you think it should be compulsory for state teachers to know sign language?
Oof, that's a hard question. We suffer a lot from demands from different sources, and should be compulsory to have so many requirements. If the school system provides the time and the payment as part of the working hours to study Chilean Sign Language, yes. If it's something that the teacher has to do on their own time, apart from the working hours and from their own salary, no. This cannot be, of course, this is a great innovation and intention from what has happened with this particular teacher in his career as a teacher. But the only way to consider these elements as part of policy making is that they go beyond the initiative, the individual initiative, because otherwise we keep pushing this huge machine just with our own hands without the support that we deserve as teachers.
High demand and work overload is an issue for teachers indeed. Thank you, Christopher says. So thank you very much for your comments, your questions, the interaction that we have created in this session. Thank you, Professor, again for your thoughts, for your work. I feel it's very fascinating, and I think we should all learn a little bit more about sign language in working with deaf kids. So I just posted the link for next week's session, and as I said at the beginning of the session, 2 books will be raffled today. So I'm going to ask my colleague Monica to maybe share the screen. There we go. So the first book is Professor Jasna's book. Yeah, let's see. And the winner is Álvaro Mariano. Congratulations, Álvaro. Are you here? Yes, you are. Congratulations. Now and there it is. Miss Jasna is holding the book. We will.
Álvaro, did you have it?
Álvaro, did you have it? Well, it's a great book.
Does he have it?
Yes.
Ah, yeah.
I'm not
No?
sure. Maybe no? Well, we will get in touch with you, Alvaro, to send you the book. Okay, Monica, let's raffle the other book. And the winner is Alejandra Miranda. Clap, clap.
Yay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Just give me again, I'll in case you weren't here at the beginning, this is La Mala Educación, written by Fernando Atria. This is the book that you won. So congratulations to you both. And thank you all for participating. I hope you enjoyed this session. It's always a pleasure to see you all. And don't forget to sign up for next week's session, next Friday. And I hope you can join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, María Jesús.
Yes,
We really appreciate your participation. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience in such a generous way. Thank you. Have all a wonderful night.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
¿Es estudiante tuyo, Jesús Álvaro, el que ganó? Ah, no lo conozco tampoco.
No, yo creo, me suena que puede ser uno de los profesores de Mapuzungún, que es profe de inglés también, porque no hay tantos Álvaro Mariano, pero
Claro.
estamos todavía live on Facebook.
Yes.
Ah,
Jasna.